Hello, hello. We are on to 9.6 Part 1. Just a quick reminder, from 2 to 3, I'll be streaming on YouTube on the channel where this is posted. So if you have any questions about anything in today's video, please come holler at me tomorrow online and feel free to ask me any questions. I'll be going over more stuff, so if you want more examples or more material than this video provides, please check that out. I'll be posting it to my homework calendar, just like these are posted to my homework calendar. All right, let's talk the quadratic formula now. So we had problems that looked like this a few weeks ago. So we had something like x squared minus 4x plus 3 equals 0. And our way of solving it when it equals 0 is to factor the left side. So if I factor the left side, what adds to negative 4 and multiplies to 3 is negative 3 and negative 1. Those multiply to positive 3, add to negative 4. And so I can rewrite this as x minus 3 times x minus 1 equals 0. And then I can just solve each of these parentheses for where they equal 0, and that's at x equals 3 and x equals 1. So this is the way we did this before. But let's say you don't remember how to factor, or you don't remember to do this method. How else would you do this? Well, that's the quadratic formula. Now, I can tell you, this way is, the factoring way is better if really easy to factor. But the nice part about the quadratic formula, the thing we're going to be doing today, is it doesn't matter if you can factor it. You can always use the quadratic formula. So, let's talk about the quadratic formula. So I'm going to use the same question. I erase all this stuff. Now the quadratic formula looks like this, and it has a song. X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So this is the quadratic formula. And this is something you kind of want to know. Like, I would say probably most upperclassmen at our school actually just know this song or know the equation, the formula. This just straight up gets you straight to the answer. So if you plug in the right stuff into this, you get straight to the x equals answers. So we're going to do that for this question. Now the important first thing is I need to know what a, b, and c are. All a is the coefficient of x squared, the number in front of x squared. If there's no number in front of the x squared, it's 1. B is negative 4. C is 3. So B is always the number in front of x, C is always the number at the end of the problem. So then we just do x is equal to negative b, negative negative 4, plus or minus the square root of b squared, negative 4 squared, minus 4, times a, which is 1, times c, which is 3, all over 2 times 1. So there was no demon magic on this step, or no tricky stuff or anything like that. All we did was plug in 1 for A, negative 4 for B, and C for 3 into this equation. Okay, now that we have this, we can start simplifying. Negative negative 4 is positive 4. Negative 4 squared is 16. Negative 4 times 3 is a negative 12. And we have a 2 on the bottom. So we're almost to our answers, actually. 16 minus 12 is 4, so this is the same thing as 4 plus or minus the square root of 4 over 2. And we can actually simplify this further, because I know the square root of 4. It's 2. So I get 4 plus or minus 2 over 2. Now let's talk about plus or minus. Plus or minus means there's always two different answers. So at this step, I got to go to 4 plus 2 over 2. And 4 minus 2 over 2. 4 plus 2 is 6, over 2 is 3. 4 minus 2 is 2, over 2 is 1. And those would be our two answers. On Pearson, we go to the x equals line, and we do 1, 3. Done. Now, was this way more work than factoring? Yes. Where is this way not more work than factoring? When the numbers are harder. When it's really hard to factor, or basically impossible to factor. This is definitely the method you want to use. So let's look at an example where we really have to use this. So for this example, we're going to have negative 2x squared plus 4x plus 8 equals 0. So notice how it equals 0 from the start, so I know I can use the quadratic formula. I'm going to write the quadratic formula again. X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right, then we just plug stuff into this. Wait, I should write what everything is. A equals negative 2, b equals 4, c equals 8. All I did was pull the coefficients of x squared, that's a, pull the coefficient of x, which is 4, and pull the number at the end, and that's what c is, which is 8. Then we do negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 4 squared minus 4 times negative 2 times 8, plugging in my a, b, and c values, all over 2 times negative 2. All right, then what I'm going to do further is I'm going to simplify the inside of the square root and the bottom here. So I get negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 16. And then the negatives actually cancel, so I actually get 8 times 8, which is plus 64. We always end up adding or subtracting what's here, and we add if there are multiple negative signs, like 2, and we subtract if there are an odd number of negative signs, 1 or 3. All over 2 times negative 2, which is negative 4. I can keep simplifying. Negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 80, which is 16 plus 64, over negative 4. Alrighty. And now we've gotten to our two answers. Negative 4 plus root 80 over 4, and negative 4 minus root 80 over 4. But we can't stop here, because the square root of 80 is actually something we can pull apart further. So what goes into 80? 2 and 40, 2 and 20, 2 and 10, and 2 and 5. So I can pull out a pair of 2, so I can pull out 4. And so I can actually rewrite square root of 80 as 4 root 5. Okay. So I could call this negative 4 plus 4 root 5 over 4, and negative 4 minus 4 root 5 over 4. And are we done? Have we put the answer in its final form? And the answer is no, because there are 4's in all of these terms. So I can divide them, and I actually get negative 1 plus root 5 over 1, and negative 1 minus root 5 over 1. And this would be a place we could bail. We could also just not do the over 1 parts. It's just negative 1 plus root 5 and negative 1 minus root 5. So this question is about as hard as these get, because not only did we have to do all the square root stuff and simplify, but then we had to simplify further when we plugged back in. So our previous one was kind of the easy difficulty, where they equal whole number values. This is the harder kind, where we'd never factor it to the point where we know that negative 1 plus root 5 and negative 1 minus root 5 are the answers without the quadratic formula. Subtle reminder, when you put this into Pearson, you would write this as negative x equals negative 1, and it doesn't matter which order you put them in. Negative 1 plus root 5, comma, negative 1 minus root 5 would get you the right answer on that. All right, let's try another example. So let's say you have something like negative 3x squared plus 2x, and then I want to do this time minus 17 equals 0. So these are a little bit jankier values, but we do the same thing. A is negative 3, B is 2, C is negative 17. We take our formula. X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And plug in the stuff we know. So let's see. X is equal to negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 2 squared, which is 4, minus 4 times negative 3 times negative 17, all over 2 times negative 3. And if we look at this equation, we're going to have to simplify that inside. Let's think about this. Negative 4 times negative 3 is positive 12. Positive 12 times negative 17, we can cheat and use a calculator on this. I think it's 204, right? 12 times 17. Oh, it is 204. Fantastic. And we get negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 4 minus 204 over negative 6. And now we get to a really important warning when using the quadratic formula. If you don't get a positive inside your square root, you're done. Square root of 200, something we have to do more work on. Square root of negative 200, which is actually this question, so it's not even this. This is garbage. Square root of negative 200, where the negative is inside, not on the outside, which it is here. If you look at this, 4 minus 204 is negative 200. The second you see a negative as the result of the inside of your square root, you just say no answers. So that's pretty hunky-dory. If you get a positive inside the square root, you have to do more work, like we did in the last problem or the question before. You get a negative in the square root, you just say, nah, dog, we're good. There's nothing there. Cool, that's that question. So this can happen anytime. So if you check b squared minus 4ac, which is the inside of our square root, and if you get a negative for this, there's always no answers. If you do b squared minus 4ac and you get a positive, there's answers. So it totally depends on what that square root yields. If it yields an answer, it means, or if it yields a positive, it means we have answers. If it doesn't, it means we don't have answers. Or at least nice ones. So let's say we have something like this. Negative 1/3 x squared plus 3x. And let's do plus 2 equals 0. With our boy, the quadratic formula. So is this question going to be a little mean? Maybe. There's a fraction in it. That makes me a little bit sad. Let's check this out. So the quadratic formula says x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So let's plug it in. Oh, I didn't write what things were. A is negative 1/3, b is 3, c is 2. So when I plug this in, I get x equals negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 3 squared, 9, minus 4 times negative 1/3 times positive 2. Interesting. All over, oh, why did I cross it out? That was a very bad division sign. All over 2 times negative 1/3. Did this get harder with the 1/3? Yeah, I would argue that it did here. So let's simplify the bottom and the top. The top, 2 times negative 1/3 is negative 2/3. That's our bottom. The top, negative 3 plus or minus the square root of, and this inside. 9. If I have two negatives, I can switch them to pluses because they multiply to give me a plus. So I get plus, and I would get 8 over 3. For 4 times 2 divided by 3, 4 times 2 is 8, divided by 3 is 8 over 3. And this could be a final answer to this question. We also could go a little further and get rid of the divided by 3's in this. You can do that by 8/3 is 2 2/3. 2 2/3. And you can rewrite this as -3 plus or minus 11 2/3 over -2/3, like so. You can also multiply by -3 over -3 and get rid of the denominator on top and bottom, but this is too far and totally unnecessary. This endpoint is okay. Your answers on your homework are going to have mostly nicer values than this, so I'm not going to go further than this. The quadratic formula is incredibly flexible because it works even when numbers are horrible. So I would allow x equals -3 plus or minus, or I guess if I was accepting Pearson style answers, I would say 11 2/3 over -2/3, and comma x equals -3 minus square root of 11 2/3 over -2/3. So if you're like, Mr. Kennedy, that's brutal, I hate fractions, this totally destroyed me. Well, first, there's always a fraction in the quadratic formula, so sad panda on that front. Second, this is incredibly powerful because factoring this from the beginning, finding something that multiplies to -2/3 and adds to 3, that's really hard. And that's what the quadratic formula gets us past. If there's a positive inside the square root, we're going to have two answers. It doesn't matter how janky they are. I don't need to know the square root of 11 2/3. I just know those are answers. So the quadratic formula is very, very powerful. It gets us answers when factoring doesn't. If you can factor something, you're welcome to factor something on this homework. So if you know how to factor it right away, you're welcome to factor it. So if you get something like x squared plus 2x plus 1 equals 0, you're welcome to factor this as a way to solve it. Or you can use the quadratic formula. A equals 1, b equals 2, c equals 1. So x is equal to -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. That's our boy, the quadratic formula, and that's a 2 times a positive 1. And then we just plug in. Oh, sorry, we've already plugged in. Then we just solve as is. We get x equals -2 plus or minus the square root of 4 minus 4 all over 2. And all we get is 4 minus 4 is 0, so we get -2 plus or minus 0 over 2. But if you add 0 or subtract 0, you do nothing. So this is just -1. And we get the answer here. The same answer we'd get if we finish factoring this. So if you can factor it, you're welcome to. But if you can't factor it, use the quadratic formula. Or if you just don't want to factor it, use the quadratic formula. We're going to be doing more quadratic formula come Friday. So if you struggle at all with the homework, please show up tomorrow, Wednesday, for the live stream, or check it out if you're attempting the homework after that. And I'll try to help you more. Anyways, have a good one.